welcome back. Today I am showing you how to make the color book. This is the size small by Moments by Liz. I have done a snap instead of the other bits that she does, and I've also put on a handle, but I've also filled it so I can show you. So in here, this has got 12 crayons of the twisty kind, 12 textures, and 12 pencils. So this is for a little girl for Christmas. But it was really fun to make, and I really like the outcome. So if you'd like to see how I make this, please stay tuned. So let's get started. I have pre-cut and interfaced everything. I have interfaced both of my inside and outside pieces with the extra heavy non-woven fusible. This is 3/4 of an inch or 20mm strapping. I'm using this because it's pink and this is for a little girl. And the vinyl that I'm using is actually from Bunnings, and it's a glitter vinyl. So I just thought that would be fun. So you can still see through it, but it's also got glitter because, again, this is for like a 3-year-old. The cardboard that I'm using is like a very, very thick cardboard. You can buy it for $7 a sheet, and you get like an A0 sheet at Spotlight. It come in white and black. I got black because white gets dirty. Not that I'm going to see it, but I just got black. And you should be able to, so I'm doing the small size color book, and I think you should be able to get 2 color books out of one of the pieces of the cardboard. So I've pre-cut all of those pieces, but we're going to set them aside because I don't need them anytime soon. And so the first thing we're going to do, now I'm doing this a little bit different because this is for a little kid. Instead of the D-rings that you have on the pattern, I'm actually going to do press studs. So I'm going to put 2 press studs into it so that she can play with it that way. So we want to cut the size that's appropriate for the one that you're making. So I'm going to chop it off there. Now this stuff frays insanely quickly. So you're going to melt it like straight away. And I'm going to melt the other end as well. Otherwise it's going to start disintegrating. So that is my strap piece that I need. I can pop that aside. And then, so if you're doing the D-rings, you thread your D-rings on, fold it over, and stitch it down so that you've got your 2 D-rings here. Like I said, I'm not doing that, so I'm going to have a press stud, and I want to have a little bit of a tab that she can grab so that she can pull the press stud up. So basically, I will still be folding under the same amount that the pattern does. And then I'm just going to stitch like a rectangle there to keep it down and together. Now, obviously you don't have to do this bit if you're doing the D-rings, but I would do D-rings if this was for an adult, but I just think that the press stud's going to be easier for a little girl. So I'm just going to literally stitch the rectangle. Pop all that in the bin. Alright, so now I can pop that aside, and I'll do my press studs a little bit later. So now we're going to take our clear vinyl pocket, and I've just got a lot of binding here. I didn't cut it on the bias, but that's mainly because we're not really doing any curves on this. It's all very straight, so I didn't feel the need to do it on the bias. It also potentially wastes a lot more fabric than is necessary. So I've just chopped off the very end of the fabric. So now I'm going to fold under about, I don't know, about 3/8 of an inch. Doesn't matter how much, just something that you're comfortable to fold under so that there's not going to be any raw edges. Now I've double folded this binding, so I should, in theory, just be able to slot it on like this and stitch it along the top, which is what I'm going to do. So we're going to start right at the end A couple of stitches forward and back to lock them in, and then I'm just going to slot the vinyl up to the fold and then stitch nice and close to that edge. Slot it in. I'm just going to do it in sections. If you're new to sewing, you could definitely clip this in place. Do not use pins on your vinyl though, or you'll just add holes. Just going to slowly slot it in. You want to be close to the edge, but you also want to make sure that you're stitching both sides of the binding together. Now, when I get close to the edge, I'm just going to chop about, I don't know, it's probably about 3/8 of an inch, like past the vinyl, so that I can tuck this raw edge in as well, because we don't want raw edges. And then just stitch it down. And then back stitch when we get to the end. And then I'm just going to trim my tails. And there you go. So you could do that with like a printed binding. It doesn't have to be solid. It's just what I chose because my fabrics are quite loud. All right, next up, we're going to take our external piece, so the outside one. And we are going to measure where we're putting our strap. So what I want to do is I'm going to be using a Chaco pen. So this is just like chalk dust, and there's a wheel in the end that's going to distribute all of the chalk dust for me. So what I want to do is I want to mark here, like that. And then I want to go and find the halfway point. And then mark that. So that's to there. And then I'm going to switch to the other end. And I'm going to go and mark where that wants it to be. So to there. Oops. Lucky about chalk dust is you can just wipe it off. You could also use a friction texture for this. You don't have to use the chalk pen. I personally own both. Alright, so there's there, and then all we need to do is match up that line like that. So now I've got a line down my center, and I've measured how far back it needs to go at both ends. Right, so we want our piece of this stuff. I've done my flap edge already. I already cut that shape, so we can skip that particular thing. And then we're going to draw in where the spine lines are. So I might do this in case you can see this better. So I'm obviously not going to tell you the measurements that I'm doing, but this is a spine line here. You might or might not be able to see this easier. So we're going to make the outside first and then the inside and then bind it all together. So I'm going to put the spine line the whole way up so that we can see it. And then I'm going to measure the next spine line piece. Alright, so there's my first two. And then we're going to mark the next one. Which is there. I just want to make sure I'm getting the measurements right. like so. And then we want... So this spine here is different width to the other one. So don't just go along and assume that you know what's going on. You should double check. And then obviously, I'm just checking that the last one's right and we're actually all good. So I'm quite happy with those lines now. So they will be where we will stitch towards the end once we put our back piece on. And we're also going to, this will help us place all of our cardboard inside so that we're not going to stitch it. It will just sit in between everything perfectly. Okay. So we're going to take this and we're going to place this onto here at the original lines that we made. So the first thing I need is some double-sided tape because this is going to hold this down for me. So from this line, the chalk lines that we made first, you're going to put some double-sided tape along the line up to, where's my other mark? The other mark, which is there. And I'm going to chop this with these scissors because they were in the way. All right. Double-sided tape. So this is now going to hold this on for me. So we're going to peel. I'm going to heat it up so it sticks down because I don't know if you saw that, but it didn't stick properly. Another thing you can do is kind of just gouge at the top layer and hope that it comes off the sticky layer like that. Sometimes it's a little bit too stuck to its basing, and sometimes it just doesn't want to stick to the fabric, which is also what's going on right now. Which is fine. I will deal. You could also, I don't know why it's not sticking, but you could also use other things that aren't double-sided tape. So you could use like a tacking glue. You could just eyeball it if you're that good. You could stick it to the webbing, because apparently it's sticking to the webbing just fine. All right. New plan, because that's not working out for me. And no, I won't be editing this out. You can watch me make all my mistakes. Hopefully then you won't make them too. All right, so this is the wrong side, which is the side that I folded this part onto. We're going to stick it to the webbing. Since the other side didn't want to play ball. We're just going to really push that down in an attempt to make it not lift like it was before. So I'm just going to go along and basically pummel it so it's sticking. And then peel the backing off and hope that this round will work better. If not, you might want to think about some fabric glue. Aha! There we go. So let's try that again. So I'm going to grab it from each end and then I'm going to line it up with my original chalk lines, not my other lines. And I just want this to sit on the middle of that line. All the way up to here. So I've actually put too much double-sided tape on, but that's okay. We can just peel that off. It's the beauty of double-sided tape. It's not a super permanent thing. Okay. There we go. So now we're going to stitch that down because otherwise it's not going to stay. So I'm going to start at my short end. Like that. And I manually did that last one to make sure it's right where I want it. And then I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch each side of my strapping or webbing or whatever you want to call it. You could also make this if you wanted to out of fabric. So like the contrasting fabric that's on the inside. You could just make some basically double fold bias tape. That would work as well. And then manually crank that one and then back down the other side. I also want to chop off these tails. Where have my scissors gone? I know I don't seem very organised, but it's 5:30 in the morning, so give me a break. And this colour book is a lot of measuring, so we're going to need everything kind of on hand at all times. Alright, so there is our strapping. So eventually when we fold it all up, however it goes, that will then clip to where I'm going to put the clips. Excellent. Alright, next step is stitch it down. Okay. So now that we've done that, we're going to take our lining. That is the outside prepped for the most part. We don't need to really do anything else until we're up to sandwiching. And the same with the binding. So the binding is our last step, so I can actually pop that up there out of my way as well. So now we're going to measure basically the same lines that we did for the outside, but on the inside. So we need to... You really need a ruler for this, guys. You're going to be able to see this better on this fabric too, because it's a blue pen on a pink fabric. So that's going to help. There. And then... And yes, it is necessary to put all these markings on because they're important. That one, and then I just want to make sure that that is the... Yes, it is. Fantastic. All right, so I've got... You can't really see it on the camera, but I've got my lines. So that's where my spines are. Right sides up. And so now... We're going to take a ruler and we're going to measure up, but not to halfway. I'm going to rule a line. So this is going to be the placement for our elastic. So we're up to the elastic part, which is pretty fun. All right. So I've just drawn a line all the way across. Obviously, we won't be putting elastic in the spine, but I can iron that away or shoot it with a shot of steam a little bit later. So now comes the fun part. So we need to measure from the edge, because we don't start all the way at the edge. There's our first line. So now we're going to go and put little lines where all of the stuff goes. I'm just making sure I'm doing the lines the right size, because obviously that is important. So I'm just going to move along and line it up on my ruler. And again, I'm not telling you what the measurement is, because that's not what I do. All right, and then I just want to make sure that that is correct. which we're good. Okay, so you've got lines across here, and then you're going to skip the spine, and then we're going to, again, in fact, you could even move to this side, either side, measure a line, and then go back the other way. Or you can work your way the whole way along. It doesn't really matter, because so long as you're accurate in your measuring, it's going to work out fine. But make sure that you're doing this in something that can be removed. So whether you use a chalk pencil or the chalk wheel like I did, or the friction texter, you just need to make sure that will remove from your stuff. So now it kind of looks like Frankenstein's stitching mouth. All right, elastic. So we're going to do something similar to the elastic in the sense that we are going to measure it. And always pre-stretch your elastic. If you don't, you'll actually notice that it will stretch after like a couple of uses or wears or whatever you're doing. And then it isn't going to work till its full effect. Okay, so you get a little bit of a free... You get measurements between which sizes you can use the elastics. So depending on if you're putting like thick pencils or thin pencils will be how much that you cut. But she's actually got that written in the pattern, which is awesome. Okay. So what we want to do is now take this and measure along the elastic. So the elastic is going to be bigger. So these marks are going to be bigger than the other ones. So this is a wider gap than what we've put on the fabric. And the reason that we're going to measure it is so that it's even, and it's going to create like a little bit of a bump. So the little bit of the bump is going to make it easier to put things in, so it's not perfectly flat. But you only want a little bit of a bump, otherwise it won't hold because the elastic will be too loose. So I'm just going to go along and measure it along here. I'm not telling you what the sizes are. I'm merely saying that this one is bigger than the other one. But only a little bit, not overly heaps. And I got all of my, all of the stuff I'm putting in it, I just got from my local supermarket, actually. They had it on sale. Turns out you can now get scented pencils and things. They had scented pencils and scented textures, and I was like, wow. So, because it's for a child, I bought them. Because why not? Okay. So I'm nearly done. Boom. Okay, so now I've got my measurements on the elastic. And I'm very lucky that we're going to be able to steam this. So I won't be ironing this, I don't think, because of the glitter vinyl, this piece. What I don't want to happen is for me to melt it while I'm trying to get rid of the lines. So I'm probably just going to shoot it with steam repeatedly, which is still going to work, and that's fine. Okie dokie. So, we are sewing from right to left. So I'm going to put this right sides together that way. So I'm just going to stitch this at the spine line. Wait. I'm not going to stitch on the spine line, but rather next to it. So I just want to put that wrong sides together, like so, and then stitch this down. Now there's going to be a lot of trim your tails in this. Because that's a lot of what we've got to do. And then I'm going to line up the marks and stitch. And then trim. And I'm probably not going to trim the bottom one. Not even going to lie about that. Okay, so then I'm lining up that line with that line, and I'm making sure that the elastic is going along the middle of my thing. In fact, you could almost, maybe, and then trim, and then line her up. So I'm just going to leave the bottom ones and I'll trim them later when I'm there, because I'm obviously not there right now. You could almost not trim any of them and just have all of these lines. Move that over so that it fits. And stitch. This is actually way quicker than trimming your tails. So this is one of those instances where I'm actually choosing not to trim my tails. And over and down. Yep, you know what I probably should have done on that one? Alright, I'm going to pull this out, read the instructions. I'm going to come and trim my tails now. Now, if you can get like some funky coloured elastic, I highly recommend that. I think it would look awesome. I had a look, but there was none to be found in the places that I looked, which was unfortunate. Because I thought that would have looked amazing to have like coloured elastic for the little girl. But anyway, what do we do? Okay, so we're not stitching this part. So when you get to the spine, we're actually just going to leave it there. So leave it flat, but do not stitch it. I'm just going to stitch the next line. So we're just going to leave that spine blank, which also means that I'm not going to have... So we don't want to pull it, and we don't want to leave a bubble. We just want it as flat as possible. And then stitch the next spine line. Or just each side of it. Yeah, I'm going to stitch right there. Which now means also that all of my lines are slightly out. Because that one goes to that one. There, there, there. Alright. That's okay. What I can come and do is mark new lines. Clearly my math was out somewhere, but that's okay because we can fix that. There. 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 See, anything can be fixed, guys. Except I think I just put all those lines on wrong as well. Alright, chop it out. There we go. Now we're detached. That's going to make it easier. So, from this line, I measured the wrong way. That was my bad. Alright, so from here, I want there. Right. That should work much better. So I need to just pull this over so that that line is lined up with my other line. Yes, I said the word line a lot. And then lift and shuffle like so. So I'm just lining up the new lines that I did with, because that's all going to come off, so don't stress about that. So the wider line, I'm now lining up with the vertical ones we did. So I'm happy that I've done quite big vertical lines so that I can really see and line everything up. So my first suggestion in life would be make sure that the lines that we put on this are longer or wider than your elastic. Because that's really helping me right now. So the new problem that we have is that I did not make enough loops, but I can fix that. So I should have cut the bigger size. I don't know why I didn't. So I'm just going to tuck under that raw edge and stitch that one down, and then I've still got, actually I'm just going to put that in there like that and then grab some more elastic and fold that under. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to fold it. Should have cut the bigger size, people. That is the moral of my current story. And then there, one. And then two. And then just cut that a little bit bigger so that I've got something to tuck under. Like that. So while this is not the most ideal situation, my first suggestion is cut the piece bigger. You can always trim it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck under the raw edges. Oh no, wait. Lift up this. You could almost join it, actually. I could join this elastic at the marking point. Like this. Trim off most of the excess, and then you'll barely be able to tell. Ah, look at that. So I've just joined a piece of elastic on. You can barely tell that it's been done because I'm going to stitch at the joining point to stitch it down to create my loop. So you're not going to see that joining stitch anyway. I like it. That was a very easy fix, actually. My snips are going blunt. Stitch back, and then for the last one, I'm just going to tuck under the raw edge and then stitch it down. Like so. Alright. Crisis averted, people. I managed to fix that with minimal thing. Right, so cut the longest size of elastic suggested by the pattern, not the shortest end. You can always chop off extra. And I'm just now going to come along and trim all of my tails off. And then I'm going to go and shoot this with some... Actually, I'm not going to shoot it with steam, but I am going to iron in between, but not where the spine pieces are, to get rid of all of those marks before I attach this. Because once I attach this, the ironing becomes a lot more difficult. So I'm just going to go quickly iron over the elastic to remove all of those lines. So I have ironed it. And so now there's not lines all over everything, which is nice. I'm just going to come and trim these back tails so that they don't annoy me later. I could have done this off camera, but then I may have forgotten to tell you. So here we are doing it now. All right. Excellent. So now we're going to take our vinyl piece and it's going to sit along here. Now, if you have got a raw edge, what they actually suggest is put right sides together and we're going to stitch just this side of the spine. Let me move those scissors because they're in my way. All right. So we're going to stitch in what's called the airspace, which is just before the spine. So I'm going to stitch and then back stitch and go down like that and then back stitch just to seal it off. And then we're going to pull this out. And then I'm just going to fold this over. And I'm going to tack it within, like right on that edge. So this is basting. So I'm going to baste it to the base of the lining. I'm going to say bag then, but this technically isn't really a bag. It's more of a folder. Alright, and then this edge is going to actually be in the binding. For me, because I want it to. Alright. Love it. So we're nearly up to, like, binding, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, if your pattern has a right versus wrong side, this has actually worked out quite well because I've got blue versus pink where the colour change happened. But anyway. So what I want to do is I'm going to line this up and then theoretically all of my spine lines also are going to line up and I'm going to stitch them together. But before I go stitching, I want to absolutely make sure that this is lined up. So by doing this, I'm not going to baste them together, and you might wonder why, and I'll tell you. We still need to put in our cardboard. So I want to be able to slot it in, basically. So I'm going to make sure that everything is lined up, because everything should be the same size, and it's going to matter. So I'm putting on a lot of clips to make sure that everything is exactly even. And then I'm going to stitch my spine lines, and then I'm going to insert my cardboard stability. And the reason I'm not just using like bag stabilizer is because this is way, way thicker. Like, look at that. I obviously could bend it. I'm not going to, but it will also take a fair amount of effort as opposed to the bag stabilizer, which is not as sturdy, I guess. Also, another really cool thing, if you're making like a big duffel bag or, you know, a big bag in general, you could actually use this cardboard as your base piece stabilizer, as long as you either glue it or rivet it down. So if you're using bag feet, you would put the bag feet through this stuff as well to hold it in place. But that would be really cool. All right, we are all lined up. I might just whack a few in the top for good measure. I'm also going to pin this over here so it stays put. The only reason I'm also pinning the top is because I've got a bit of a loop and I want to make sure that that's not actually going to affect my top stitching. So I'm literally clipping the whole way around just to draw some vertical lines, and then I'm going to take most of the clips off. If you wanted to, you could baste just the bottom edge, and then so you could still insert your cardboard. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're left-handed, or you're giving it to someone that's left-handed, you could have put this on the other way so that your flap goes the other way. It won't affect it ultimately. It's just if you wanted that. So, here we go. Slow and steady wins the race because I want this to be like epically straight. Now, lots of people struggle with straight lines. So here's my tip to you. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, watch the needle. The needle is irrelevant. It's going to go up and down, and if you stare at it, you're going to go crooked. So what I'm doing is I'm actually staring at the gap between my foot and making sure that the line that I've drawn is perfectly in between that. Because if that's the case, then it's going to stitch perfectly straight. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky. I just hit the edge of this thing and it's throwing my stitches off because it's so thick. So, because of that reason, I am now going to manually crank until I get past it. Because I obviously don't want my stitches crooked. And that is just because that bulky bit there. Alright, so now we're going to come and do these other two. I'm going to move my scully so that I don't knock it, so I can't be bothered picking them up again. And I'm still back stitching. I'm also going to stitch through the elastic and through my vinyl pocket. And then back stitch. Because it's vinyl, make sure you've got your Teflon foot, or put a piece of the Teflon tape on the foot that you're using, just to ensure that you're not going to slip on the vinyl. I could definitely stitch faster, but accuracy is key, because these are the spines. Alright. So now what we're going to do is actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch, I'm going to move this up to the top, like so. And I'm going to stitch from this flat bit down across the bottom and up the other side. So what I literally want to do is just leave this top section open so that I can slot in the cardboard inserts. So I'm doing this right at the edge. So this is just a basting line. So I'm still going to backstitch because I don't want it to come undone. But I'm going very, 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 and I just ran out of bobbin thread. Very, very close to the edge because I want all of these stitches hidden under the binding that I'm going to do in a minute. But by basting it all together, it's going to make it easier for the cardboard to sit where I want it to. And it's going to be quicker to bind it if it's already together. Needle down and pivot. Needle down right on that edge. And again, pivot. The basting doesn't have to be perfect, so I can go a little bit faster along the straight long bits. And then needle down and pivot. And back stitch. Now obviously we don't want to go across the top because then we can't get the cardboard in. So these are my pieces. I'll start with the easy one. easy one being the flap. It obviously only has one home, like so. Ta-da! And that is now like super stiff and I love it. So these were 2 different sizes. So the bigger one, which one's the bigger one? This is the bigger one. That's what I thought, but then I thought I'd just check. So we're going to slot that into there. Now that shouldn't be too easy. Like, it shouldn't be loose and floppy, but it also shouldn't be so hard that you can't get it in. And then we're going to do the same to the little one over here. I like to do the little ones first because there's a good chance that I would have dropped them. Alright, and then in its slot, maybe. It goes. It's just firm. Firm is good. Firm is what I want. This is extra firm, but, you know, it's alright. Come on. And you just want to make sure, so I haven't quite pushed it down far enough. So I'm just going to maneuver it, I guess. Alright, so then we should have 2 more. And one piece is bigger than the other. And I just have to remember which one goes where. So that one goes, you can tell, right? Because they only fit one way, really. So then we're going to slot that into there. And if you've done your measurements, they do fit. I can see it fits. See that? Slot that in, but it's firm. And firm is what we want. Look at that. That's looking lovely. And because of this part of the spine, see how it then sits up? Now, one thing I do want to do, and I'm doing this now, is because I'm putting this with a snap, I need to mark my snap pieces, obviously. So I want to make sure that it's not, I'm not pulling too tight. Like, I just want it to sit flat, which I'm pretty sure is what's going on there. So with my friction pen, I want to mark where I'm going to put my snap, because we're going to do that now. Which is right there. So then I want to take this out. This is why I'm doing it now, because I need to make sure that it's going to sit exactly where I want it. And then this is where I want my hole. So this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky. Because I have to puncture a hole inside. Oh, actually, you know what? That wasn't that hard. I lied. Sorry. I thought that was going to be a lot more difficult to get that in there, but it actually isn't at all. So that's where I want my hole. So I'm going to squish it. And then I'm going to instantly melt around the hole because this stuff frays very, very quickly. And then I want one on here. Like, I'm just going to make double sure. Right there. And then I'm going to melt this one as well. It's a violent sounding hole. It punches. And I'm just doing a quick melt. I don't obviously want to set it on fire or anything. I just want a quick hole melt, like so. And then we need the snaps. In my drawer here, I have a box of fun-looking snaps. I'm really hoping I've got some pink ones left. Oh, I do. So we just need a front and a back. Now, I'm using plastic snaps because I've got them and they're coloured and it's pink. And I've been told she's pink obsessed. So as much pink as I can get on this, the better. Alright, and then I just need to, that is for that one, and that is for that one. So the female part is going on the bag, and the male part will go on the strap piece. Just screw these on. I know usually I've got all this ready, but you know, can't win them all. And I'm not going to lose these, so I'm going to just pop them there. So that, this piece, I'm going to put up inside here, and I just dropped that. That's not ideal. All right, so I obviously have only punched it through the outside piece and the strap. And that should be strong enough. If you are concerned that it's going to pull for any reason, add another piece of interfacing on the inside. So we're not going to see it, but you know it's there. All right, and then I'm just going to, oops, preferably not do it like that. I've just dropped the snap head. All right, so I'm going to lift it up and then lay it down and squish that side on. Like so, and then I can change out this piece here and put in, oops, that's going to run away, put in the other one like that, and then that on there, this on here like so, and then squish this one down. And then you just want to make sure, before we go building everything, you want to make sure that it's going to clip on. You want to make sure it snaps. Look at that. I like it. Now I have an idea, so I'm just going to pop all of that over there for now. Alright, so we're up to, actually, we're not up to binding. Hold on a sec. I dropped in my cardboard. All right. We're going to slot the cardboard back in like that. And now we're going to bind it. So before I start trying to put the binding on, I'm going to baste this last edge because it's just going to make life way easier, because now I'm just dealing with one piece. And there's no, once it's bound together, there's no chance of it kind of flipping or moving out of the way of the binding, because if it misses, then you've got a lot of unpicking to do. So now that is just one piece all the way around. Now there's two ways to do the binding. I'm going to show you my cheats way. But the idea is that I've double folded it. So what you can actually do is open it out flat like this, stitch it in the ditch there, and then fold it all the way around and then stitch it shut. So that is like the traditional way to do binding, but I'm not big on traditional. So what I do is I just slot it on wherever I think I'm going to start. So I'm going to start not in a corner. Although a corner wouldn't be a bad idea, actually, for this. We're going to start in the corner. So the idea is, now, you can go along and clip it like this if you want to. And grab a bunch of clips and clip it on so that you know it's not going to move. Which is definitely not a terrible idea. I also want to make sure that that cardboard is all the way down where I want it, because it's not quite yet. Alright. So you can literally just come and clip this on. Like so. You work your way around. You have lots of clips, so it's going to hold in place. You want to pull it firm, but you don't want to stretch it. Trust me to get a join right on that edge. Alright, so what's just happened is where I've pinned it, the join is right on that corner. That is going to make my life very difficult. We don't want that. So I'm actually now going to take all the clips off. I know this seems counterintuitive, but just hear me out, right? That is the only join in this whole piece of stuff, and if it's right on a corner, it's going to distort it. So I'm just going to change the corner with which I start. Now, if you're doing the open binding like this, don't start on a corner. You'd kind of start like a little bit off the corner. So I'm just going to open it up and slot it over the edge and then peg it down. Now, when we get to a corner, you want to hold it, and I'm pinching it right at that seam, and then I'm going to open this up and basically create the mitered corner by hand and then clip it. So that takes a bit of practice, but it can totally be done. And the reason that I'm relatively proficient in this is how I used to do my aprons. Before I rounded the corners of the pattern, they actually had sharp edges. So this is how I learned to do it this way, because otherwise the aprons would take me like 4 hours. And that was just a lot. So now the join's here, and it's nowhere near an edge, so it's not going to affect me as I'm stitching it down, which is lovely. Exactly what we wanted. So I'm not pulling and stretching it, but I am making sure that it's firm. Otherwise, you're going to get little bumps and stuff in it. Now, I don't actually even need to clip this. I probably could have skipped the clipping stage, but I did want to show you. So then again, we get to the corner, hold it at the edge, and then we're going to flatten this out on the seam and then fold it over. And then put a clip on it, or a peg, or whatever we're calling them. And then again. So then we've got another corner. So again, pinch it, flatten it, and then bend it on itself to create that corner. This one's a little bit more fiddly because it's not as cornery, but it can be done. I just dropped a clip, I heard that. The other option is you can actually pull it and kind of curve that edge if you wanted to. I don't want it curved, I want it nice and crispy, like so. And then again, squish over. And we're just going to keep clipping. If you've done the clipping, you can do this without clipping. I've still got, she is releasing the sewing book and the art book. So I will also be, I will do the binding a different way on one of those. Just to show you that there's more than one way to do these. Now, if this was like a big curve, or it had a lot of curves instead of corners, I wouldn't do it this way. I would do it the traditional way of stitch it and then fold it over. And if this was a live video, I wouldn't be clipping it because I can do it without it. But this is a teaching video, so this is one way to learn to do binding on straight edges. Alright, so I'm about to the end. So now what I want to do is I want to clip off, I just want to go like 1/2 inch past, and that's just enough to tuck under. So So I'm going to take off this clip because it's in my way, and I'm going to tuck under that raw edge. In fact, to make sure that you can't see any raw edges, have it on one side, then tuck it over that edge. How'd that thought? That shifted. There we go. So you want to tuck it over the edge and under, and then over. So that you can't see a raw edge here, and you can't see any of the raw edges there. And then put the clip back on. So now, that's got the binding all the way around it. So now all we have to do is stitch down. So I'm going to start from this edge here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do that little corner piece so that it doesn't shift. So I'm going to stitch forward and back. So that has both locked it in and done that little edge. And then I'm just going to stitch around slowly. Get to the mitered corner that you've manually done, needle down, and pivot. As you can tell, I'm not rushing through this. This is like a top stitching thing. You want to go slow and deliberately. Clean up my pegs, clips, whatever. Whoops. Needle down, pivot. Needle down and pivot again. I'm also going to fold that over so that it's a little bit easier. Needle down, pivot. Needle down, pivot. I'm sure you're sick of me saying it, but I'm going to keep doing it. And back stitch. Trim off your tails. And now technically you are done. However, this is for a small child. And so I have decided that I want a handle. So I'm going to make a handle. But you could quite easily say, hey, look, I am done, and that is adorable, right? Super cute. I love it. However, that is a lot to carry for a small child. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a handle here. And I'm just going to use some of the webbing. And I possibly could have stitched this on before. Now that I think about it, probably I could have just like added it in like that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut at the width of the bag, but then I'm going to tuck in some of the raw edges. So I'm going to trim that, and I'm instantly going to melt it because this stuff has issues. And you always want to try and use the blue part of the flame so that you don't discolor your stuff. Okay. So, a couple of ways you could do this, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to literally fold under 1 inch on each edge and then stitch that inch as my handle. So tuck it under like this. Now, obviously, I don't want it to be flat. I want it to have a handle. So I'm going to measure in an even amount and then draw a line because I want her to be able to easily grab it and take it with her everywhere. So from the very, very edge, I'm going to measure in and draw a line, and then I'm going to do that same measurement on the other side. Draw a line. Now, you could rivet this down if you wanted to, but I'm going to stitch it. So I'm going through the cardboard, so I just need to be really conscious of that, and I'm really hoping this machine's going to do it. I have faith in my machine, but if you don't think your machine will do that, put 2 rivets on here. That would also work because you can rivet through the cardboard. All right, let's do this. Now go very slowly in case it doesn't want to stitch through the cardboard. You also don't want to go fast when dealing with stuff like that. And I'm going to do my crisscross thing because I like it. You could do the crisscross and rivets, but because this is the size small, it's not going to have that much weight in it. I'm just going to fold that like that so I can get this under the machine and then backstitch. So that's one side of my handle attached. And then I'm going to come and do the other side. So my machine is sewing through the cardboard quite successfully. I'm very proud of that. Someone's going to ask me in the comments, could you do this on a domestic machine? And the answer is, I don't know. But if I were to be stabbing through the thick cardboard on a domestic, I would most likely be using a leather needle to do so. And if you didn't have a leather needle, definitely a jeans needle. Because, yeah, it's quite intense. There's the cardboard's very thick. That was the point. I'm actually going to backstitch this bit because it's going to be easier to do in my machine, weirdly enough. Because of the book, it was easier to backstitch that line. Again, don't necessarily do that unless you're feeling confident that it's going to work. So there we go, guys. I have now got a handle. Perfect for a little kid. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm sure you'll come and pop in and see the next one. All right, bye guys.